To the merry cricketers, welcome. It's still happening to us, folks. Not enough stepping up. Not enough stepping up and in the right way. I just don't know what more to say. We just got to start doing better. It was kind of interesting in the chats before in UCY chat. Thank you for all y'all that tune in there. I was able to kind of focus on a little remedy on how we start thinking about it. I noticed lots of people you have the insight of what's going wrong, and my position has been a long time ago. Okay, we see what's wrong. What are we gonna do about it? And I was able to offer in a concise manner, more to the point when I talked to you on the broadcast, what we can do. There's things we can do, and I was telling you the momentum is against us, so we've got to slow that machine down and then reverse it, if you will. And actually, the reversing is getting it back in the right direction and going the right way, and hopefully in a speed that we're in control of instead of the way it's been taken off the track. And so I was able to show in a more organized fashion in the UCY chat. Anybody's in it can go back maybe and see what it was. That the steps that we've been taking. Does it mean that we're finished? No. We just established a foundation. We've got some people that I work with that they put their 100% in. I don't know about 110%, but they put their 100 in. I guess if we were a helicopter, we can go 108 without the hub coming apart. I guess we can go over 100% that way. But you put out what you put out, dedicated for the thing you do, and we build together the efforts that we put together, and it slowly starts to make changes that haven't happened. If it ever happened, it haven't happened for a very long time. It certainly haven't happened automatically like the way the law actually sits there. I'm really past and beyond looking at the world as the broken world and saying that because that world is broken, then the underlying systems that are really inert are the fault. And besides, how big a job do you think you have when you're going to rechange the world like these certain globalists do on an ongoing basis? We're just coming to that. There's dynamics that always go on. There's lies that happen. We can see them all. But okay, what are you gonna do about it? And I mean, really do better than just complain and whine. And so anyway, I appreciate being able to sit in the chat and just all of a sudden it just came to my mind. I can throw some links together. I can show what we've done, at least, I know there has to be a bigger understanding about what the words in the document say, but that's okay. There they are. It's somewhat of I called it a remedy. I think it is a remedy. The natural consequence and progression of which gets us right to, well, when do we start making the arrests? And that's right. When do we start making those arrests? Well, those take a little bit more to do, and we're setting that up. As I was talking here, I think last week about last response that's gotten a lot of traction. That response was put together in a presentation before a county commissioner, the commissioners of which voted to take the criminal claims that are in that coordination comment from the Jefferson Mining District, and referred it to the DA to check to investigate the crimes that are alleged. Now that hasn't happened. We've never seen that happen before, and so now what we've set up, and this is all. I don't tell you a whole lot of how this works as far as tell you there's a strategy and a tactic behind this, because it's not just what we just done and we watch and we see. No, this is set up. Now that we've got the commission to see the law and that they are required to actually advance it, now we've got the DA who's an attorney. He's now on a constitutional criminal complaint if he doesn't act. And so we're making a methodical record of what we all know is the fact, and it's beyond our opinion. I keep telling you, it's right there to do. We just have to do the work. We have to roll up our sleeves and just do that. So I do appreciate being able to sit in the chat room, and particularly this time was a UCY. I went over to freedomsnetwork.com for those of you that are interested. It's another social network. And I dropped the essence of that discussion in there to memorialize that that communication, that chat, over the observations of people, and then what I propose. Well, I don't propose. I actually stated what we did about it, what we're doing about it. And so there's working together. I think we're going to do very well, getting our mind more oriented in a better place, and addressing the things beyond our frustration is going to be important. Seeing what is for fact, not being persuaded away from our own ability and knowledge is crucial. You really have to have a substantial place you stand. Again, as I've told you, I'm looked on by some, and we're finding out a lot of those some that look at me, they're actually threatened because I'm actually a witness to, or potentially so, of their conflict of interest in their faux resistance, their faux patriotism, if I can call it that, their faux, what it is, it's controlled opposition. And they know that I have, if you will, the eyes and the ears to see and hear that conflict of interest. And so my views are then deemed arrogant to cover. And that's okay, because I know, at some point, folks, you just know. The principles are in us. We either finally agree to them that they're there, that we've been denying them in us. That said, that required us to have a responsibility. And I can, there's lots of ways to describe it. Behind the woodshed, I kind of throw it out to you for at least a national sense. It's that republic if we could keep it, heavy on the if we could keep it part. That's the responsibility. I can go to international law and tell you that the international provision for occupying forces is don't piss off the natives. In other words, it's the obligation and duty of the people to throw it off. You have to do this stuff. It's a dynamic world. You can't be static in it. And so we want to make sure that we have our information correct. And with all the information, it is kind of difficult, but maybe not so much after you get the eyes to see and ears to hear. Literally, it comes to you. There's no question about that. And it may sound like arrogance when I can tell you, no, I can take just a few seconds sometimes of someone talking to know where they're at, how they got there, where their mistakes were. Why? Because I've run through all those forest trails, folks. That's what I've done. And I've taken stock, and I tried to remember all these things. And you remember, you kind of forget some things, but you hold on to the keys, and that's really more what I do. And you'll probably do that. It's the economy of how you have to work, the efficiency. You can't burden yourself down as you try to move in a movement to attack somebody, to defend yourself from something. You have to move light. You have to carry with you these things. That's why it really starts to come quickly. It's like light what you bring. Everything is an answer. It's immediate. It's not a discussion. It's not a debate. It's not a question. It's not an argument. And yes, I've had to give over a bit to an objective basis. Now, who made that? It wasn't me, but I've qualified it. That's another thing you do. You qualify the rules and principles you will use. Are they what they say they are? Do they go and do they protect what they say they're supposed to protect? And when you start to finally agree for yourself what that is, you will start making your own foundation. No one's going to toss you off of that. Nobody. Once you make that for yourself and you keep honest to the fact that you be humble, you've got to know that maybe you've made mistakes. I'm always looking for mine. I tell you about that. I'm always looking for a mistake somewhere. And the more I don't find it is okay, but I don't get all thinking I know it all. You never, ever know that there's someone knowing better than you, just waiting in the wings to trip you up. Right at the right time too. They'll do it. They do it. And this is the other thing. Look for the timeliness of an interesting objection to what you're doing. Don't ever look past that problem. You might be looking at your actual nemesis that you can get around. You just have to You have to have the humility to know that maybe they know something and they're waiting for you to step in the trap they've made for you. And a lot of that gets less to do, a lot less of a threat when you understand the terrain yourself. That requires you had to go out and do it. Anybody who's been ever went out in the woods, you get familiar. You get familiar by getting out in it. And even so, being familiar, you realize in the back of your mind, be careful not to get too haughty about how much you know the lay of the land, like you know it like the back of your hand, because one day you'll walk up a hollow that you didn't understand. And then there's the real boogeymen in the world of the forest. That's a fun and interesting lesson. Talk about natural forces that you don't understand. Talk about creating confusion in your mind. It's all there in the nature to explain to us if we're aware of it. It's pretty neat. And it gives you these tools. You go learn your experience by doing it, folks. This is what I've been trying to tell you. There's not enough of us doing it correctly, and those few of us that are doing it are seeing things that don't normally happen. And again, everywhere we go with what we do, by those that are ostensibly the one that everyone else and we would have prior put a knowledge upon, an expertise upon, professionalism on, or whatever word we want to have, the go-to ones, the titled ones in the society, the licensed ones to do what they're doing, they can't. They are astonished at what we do. They've never seen it before, what we do. And I'll tell you, if you're seeing progress in the right direction, then that's a good place to be. And I'm asking you all to kind of go there, because it's an interesting way to see things. It may be a lot of work, but there's a lot of reward in the fact the little incremental territory we take back is very monstrous stuff. It's monstrous big things. And each one of us working in our way. But getting back to the idea, we got to look through the noise, look through this deceptions. As you said, I try to do this all the time. I want to bring us back here now. I've been an ongoing report, and I keep telling you this just to touch a little bit of it. I want to point out something else. Deception that's been going on. It has great ramifications in lots of ways. I've talked about it in various over time since 2012. It's this Benghazi issue, and a couple weeks ago or so, a week ago, a story pops up. Another one, the ongoing saga of Benghazi. I wanted to cut through this because it created a potential question in what I told you before. So I've got to stay true to you and stay true to my knowledge and go perfect this. Colonel Andrew Wood, U.S. rescue team, was on its way to Benghazi but ordered to turn back. And this report you'll get in the Blogcaster. You can read it yourself. And I really wish everyone does. Go to the Blogcaster at reallibertymedia.com. And I'll have it posted post-production 2 hours or so after the broadcast. I put it all together just so you can see these things. There was this guy, this colonel, comes out and says that these rescue teams were on the way. Just as I told you, my source told me had to be. And in this story, it ends up going through, and he wants to talk about, but the rescue was interrupted. This transport, or the C-130s that were going in, were not given the permission to go over the border. And so they're trying to get us focused in this story that was the big deal. That all of a sudden now there was somebody involved that stopped that rescue. But see, they don't really say much. They don't really tell you about that. And I think that's the key right here. As I went back to my source, that weeks after that Benghazi thing, I told you it was the President of the United States, so-called, the unqualified one, who would be the only one that could order the rescue stopped. Well, this puts a new wrinkle, that the transports were not given permission to enter is not the same decision. And I went back to my source and I said, okay, so what's this little conundrum they're trying to build in? And we ultimately I talked with him for about 15 or so, 20 minutes about this particularly. And I was going through all my thoughts about it, trying to keep it oriented. And we're focused on the idea, who gives the permissions for all these? What it comes out to be is that these transports, and there's all reasons for why the military does what it does. And don't forget, that's the consequence on top of it all. This has to be another plan. But they tried to bring in this question of who was possibly the problem. They're trying to hide from you who the real answer is. This brings up this question of not giving permission, puts in people's mind that there was somebody stopped that rescue. And you put your mind on the transports. And then I found out the transports, different than the unqualified one, can shut and down the whole rescue. The transports have authority through both the Office of the President and the State Department. And this is important to understand because the United States of America is controlled by a civilian, if I can call it that way, which tells you that the civilian authority reference is from a military perspective. Let's never forget this part. But the civilian authority controls the military. And that was loosely to keep, to reduce and eliminate as much as it can, and we haven't seen one, a coup of the military that happens everywhere else. So there's a definite hierarchy here that we really pay attention to, that when a plane on a military mission is going into an area, if it's a transport plane, or what we find out is a slower moving plane that doesn't have the capacity to defend itself, it must get permission. And so they're focusing on this Benghazi, that it didn't get permission. The rescue was thwarted by somebody. The actual authority, they leave it to almost like the military would have had a decision that these transports don't get. But when you look at the actual authority, it was either the ultimate authorities in the President or now the Secretary of State, the State Department, which would have been Hillary Clinton. So they're trying to muddy the waters here. But let's get to the point. The transports are given permission. They're required to get permission because they are a target in a battle zone. They're slow moving. And in this case, you hear right in the story, there was troops on board those planes. So they have to be very careful about when they're, even in the fog of war, they got these mandates so that they don't get people in more trouble than they got to start more trouble than what they began with. That the planes were not stopped, those transports going into Benghazi were not stopped and not allowed to enter on their own authority. It was because there has to be a prerequisite condition that's established. That prerequisite condition for the slower moving transport craft is that the fighter jets, who are not constrained at all in what they do, border or not, have to clear the airspace of operation before a transport can go in. And the fighters were going in, and they didn't need permission, but they're in operations mode. When the fighters got to where they were their target, they had no resistance, and apparently these fighters are very capable to find most all resistance that may be there and deal with it. That's why they go in first. That when the fighters got there to Benghazi over the area, they were ordered to take pictures, not take care of the opposition. That is a wave off. That is a presidential wave off. Otherwise, they would have went in and cleared the airspace. When they didn't clear the airspace, the transports could not go in. And so they were not given permission. In the heat of the moment, the troops are not given have to be asking permission in this moment. You don't want to send a bunch of troops in slow-flying planes into an area that hasn't have an airspace cleared out. But the jet fighters who have no restriction other than the presidential stop, the wave off, were ordered not to clear the airspace, but to take pictures. So that's why they have lots of images about what happened. But ultimately, those transports could not get permission. Why? Because the airspace was already not cleared. It has nothing to do with those aircraft. They just couldn't go in. Military operations procedure says you don't go into an uncleared airspace. And so this ends up being, at the end of the moment of the discussion, this issue trying to move who done it, who waved that thing down, who stopped it, who stopped that rescue of those people, who lost the war at Benghazi over the American territory. They want to put it on this lack of entry of the troop transport, when in fact that's a red herring, folks. It's a red herring. Had the president not waved off the fighters from clearing the airspace, they could have given the permission. The C-130s and the transports were told after the fact. They knew, the military knew going in that the airspace was not cleared. The fighter pilots who were there, who were told to take pictures instead of clear the area, didn't know that until they were told that right over the area. They knew they weren't going to get any resistance up until then. And then remember, we had the question of why so many people were resigning, folks. This makes so much sense now. At the time, we were saying, well, Obama was cleaning house of the resistance that he got. Actually, what was going on is, you think about this as a pilot. If you were a pilot, you go trained to protect the troops in your country and all this, and you're watching the territory of your nation getting taken over by a bunch of people down below, and you're ordered to take pictures. You're watching your comrades in arms die, and you're told to take pictures of it. Then you go home. And what they said is, we weren't trained to do that. I resign. That makes a lot more sense than Obama clearing house. I just wanted to point out the way they get us mixing up these decisions. We've got to keep our focus on what the focus is. This story comes out. I don't know who Colonel Wood's working for here, because he didn't say a lot in this video here. This web story. To clarify quite a few things. He throws it into the question, folks. And so much so that it looked like it was a potential, I can't say threat, but a challenge to what I'd told you and what my source was telling me. That I had to clarify it for you all in case you heard it or didn't understand it or didn't catch that, or maybe not interested. I hope you're at least a little interested, because this is a big deal, actually, in my mind, what happens here. Notwithstanding it's a military operation, that's just a crime anyway. There's the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix here are profound. That we have to understand these things to understand how much work is really on us. I saw these are representations of mirrors. These are carnival mirrors for us to watch through the distortion, what's going on in our own country, what we've allowed. whether or not this Colonel Andrew Wood is telling us, he may be telling us the truth that it was telling us the truth that the permission was not given. He doesn't tell us the why. He doesn't tell us then follow up and say who had that decision. And so they tried to muddy the waters here. They tried to show that there was more decisions people that could have made the decision. They tried to make us think that the C-130s not going in to provide aid was the important point, when in fact it's a red herring. They can't go in until that airspace is cleared, and that wave off is only done by the office of the president. So let's keep our focus on the target, on what's going on here. This seems to be another type of cover-up. It's still it's a festering pus pocket, folks. You have to understand the rollout, the ripple effect of this on what you thought was the United States of America and what's going on. Now, that said, I know it's probably beyond us at that level to make the proper responses, but as I'm asking you to do, get responding to something local to you. You learn how to make it proper. You learn better how to communicate what we need to be communicating, so that it's impossible for them to deny. In other words, like the paperwork the documents that I put into the UCY chat, when you go through those documents, you see what happened. We come to the day now, it's 3 years later, in this battle to regain the mechanisms of government for our use, and to really just to keep the peace, just to enforce the law. It's taken 3 years, but we've built the case. We've kept focused on the actual target, on who the responsible parties are. And you put so much pressure in that area that everybody witnessing it can't deny that, and the heat is on the ones that have the duties and obligations. And I think that's partly what happened. When they got to the commissioners, they realized that they're sitting in a problem. They either put this to the law, the DA, or they themselves are found to be those accessories. And what we were alleging in the DSL paper was we're looking at war crimes, and that seems to have gotten the imagination of people in the seats of decision. So wouldn't have told you that we've taken that. I thought the simple black and white in your local state code or law, whatever you want to call it, was sufficient enough. Apparently, we're at the day, I told you before, that people in seats of decision are beyond the world of power. Beyond. They think they've got it controlled, and all I see is that was because there was no accountability. The story with this colonel is to try and persuade us away from where the accountability may reside. And I want us to keep focused on that. Because by doing that, you're also seeing there's a hierarchy of organized society that must be kept, or you live in a tyranny. And if we're going to let a little bit go, or a little bit, because it seems to be so far away, if we let that go, we're just letting it go everywhere. Anyway, so that's more insight to me for sure, and analyzing this thing to find the red herring in the story outs the colonel one way or the other when he doesn't give us the rest of the story. But we aren't persuaded that the unqualified one didn't allow that embassy and that the United States soil underneath those things, and they tried to persuade us that they were contract areas and all these other things. The embassy was actually the ambassador, and they didn't protect that, and they didn't protect the soil he was on. And guess what? We lost that war. And so there's a bigger deal going on here, and we can sit back and be crickets to it, or we can stay focused, and whether or not we can do something directly, we can be aware, and we can have the knowledge about how they did it, so we see the method, and then we know how to start subverting that method when we see it happen. As I tell you, it's like lightning to watch the method pop up and to have an answer to it. It doesn't take a long time to interject yourself into it to stop it. In substantial ways, if you're there, but you have to be there. And so the other option is they make sure that you're not there. And we see a lot of that. They take you out, they take you down, they put you in their little, they call them jail cells. They're little, all they are is just warehousing units for like zoos. Put you in your cage. I was talking about these watch lists and this, this international war of terror. and they created all these excuses, and they hide behind all these little diffuse stories. And if you don't keep track of the point, you miss it. You certainly miss it. And I was talking to you about these watch lists and putting innocent people. And so from our perspective, it's just, it's an anecdotal evidence of how they're innocent. I gave you our reason, and our chairman being put on one because we were so audacious and arrogant as to think that the agents of government were committing felonies and treason. And so we made a show cause demand upon at least one. And our answer to that wasn't the arrest or the criminal complaint or the answer as to why their failure to show cause wasn't an admission. No, it was the governments themselves jumping on us and putting at least our chairman on a watch list. He's completely innocent. What they did there was tampered with evidence. They committed more felonies. But so we take another while to have to go work that out. But here it is. Even without your integration, a report is coming out now that a U.S. Marshal says innocent people are placed on a watch list to meet quotas. So you don't even have to give them a purpose, as I've been telling you folks. Just make this stuff up. If you make yourself available, you're just throwing the dice of you becoming the thing that gets made up. Marshals say they must file one surveillance detection report, or SDR. I find these pretty interesting correlation between this and economy and the finances of the world. SDR per month. They are required to file these things once per month. And they're attached, as I told you this before. This is not it's totally consistent with what I've told you over and over and over. You don't need a quota system like for traffic tickets. If you threaten somebody with their job or threaten to take an advancement, those people will just start writing those tickets. You don't even have to put them on a quota. You just say, we need more. And then a half a breath later you say, but if we don't get it, then we can't review your personnel file to give you that raise you want. I don't need a quota when I threaten someone. The people aren't stupid. They know what they have to do now. Marshals say innocent people are placed on the watch list to meet quotas. I can go through the story. Again, these titles, I guess I picked these reports they're self-evident. Well, more importantly, they're consistent in confirmation of what I've been telling you for years here. Not to make myself right, to say that this is a reality that's knowable and provable. And now you have the proof. Any of you that are travelers and you get into this, I was telling you those, what what's his name? I get all these people, they're just useless to us all, actually. Jesse Ventura, I get his name all screwed up. What he should have done, you now can do. Innocent passengers being entered into international intelligence databases of suspicious persons acting in a suspicious manner on an aircraft, and they did nothing wrong, said one federal air marshal. International. Now we kick us back to the rendition. Remember, we talked about it behind the woodshed about where the heck is Interpol getting the right to rendition you out of this country, but through that agreement that they did that. Why are they doing that? I told you it's because this is coming here. And here it is. Everything goes into an international database. Did you know that? Just as an example, some tourists in Las Vegas, and this is out of Las Vegas, the Las Vegas area, was taking a picture with their phone out the window as the airplane was taxiing down to see the Las Vegas skyline. They got put on a terror watch list just for doing that. The story also goes on to tell you that some agents won't do it to get the raise. That's no consolation. But we got some honorable ones, I guess. My thought is, why didn't they come out before? The point is that they make stuff up, folks. I keep telling you, you can't make yourself vulnerable to this, and you have to be vigilant, diligent, and persistent against this encroachment. Call it out. Call it out. This big data thing is no joke. I keep telling you that. I know you'd probably even know that, but it's just, you just can't sit and let this stuff come up. I can't see how we can sit. I should say it better that way. While we see the clarity of this, and the proofs are all with us, right? It's coming out. The internet is that wonderful thing. We have the opportunity now to make it so. that we can call these things out for what they are. When you have to go to a quota system, well, first of all, why? But when you have to go to a quota system, you're just proving there is no war of terror. There's a war on terror. There's a war of terror. You got no business, folks. It's what we found. What I told you about the retelling of the story of my friend in court over a traffic issue. The question: am I a man? All you free men, you're just out there. You're free men on the land stuff. All you people, I'm not a corporation. There's a way to get at that. Quit talking about it. Get at it. Am I a man? Cop won't tell you. And when he finally got forced to tell you, the judge steps up and says, I can't let that information into the record. If I did that, we can't prosecute anyone. I'm looking at the same thing here. They put people on watch lists just because. Just cause. Ain't no good reason. Just cause. Because if we have you in the database, we have control. If we can't get you in the database, we got nothing. If we can't make you a legal entity and not make you believe that it's not you, I mean, it is you, but it's not. That what we're dealing with is a legal fiction and not the man or the woman. Or even as legal produces a woman to be man, in other words, to treat it. Boy, what a ongoing fraud we live in. But at any rate, again here, they can make stuff up. They make up the fact in a court that you're this legal fiction and you don't know the difference, and you don't say, wait a minute, I want to get on the record that I'm not that legal fiction, I'm a man or a woman. And then you hear from the judge's own lips, well, we can't let that evidence in. Isn't that just a self-evident evidence that you need? I mean, you don't even have to discuss it anymore. This is organized crime under the color of authority. That's a felony. Call it out. Get it on the record. This is, I guess, our last thing that we were doing. We're moving now to make the arrest, or show how no one will make those arrests. We're still to there. We're showing the fallacy of the system without opinion, folks. There's just only not enough of us. If there was a din of evidence going on, the noise of this proof was where you can't turn around to find it anywhere, a contrary voice, a contrary word, a contrary evidence. It has to impose itself on people's impressions, especially when everyone's getting frustrated and they want to argue and rail against old taxes is no good, codes are no good, your traffic code's no good, it's it's no justice. How do you expect justice in an unjust system? Well, you don't. I mean, why even ask the question? If it's an unjust system, you should have been outing it and arresting it. So we tolerate too much, don't we? So if you need any information more, here's more for those of you that want to step up and go after those standard operating procedures, the TSA, and maybe even the FBI and all. You'll be put on a watch list, but it don't matter. See, they can make it up. So you might as well go down exposing it. If you go down on that, see, if you expose it, they have a whole lot more trouble, don't they? They have a whole lot more trouble. When you throw that part, that retaliation and retribution for you trying to arrest them crime into your record, they start to see, wow, even if we move against them, they've made a record that we would. That invokes another federal law. Does it matter? Well, the point is that you're breaking evidence that they do not act within the constraints of law at all. And then your question becomes, then what good are you? Well, that has to become a massive awareness for people. Most people don't want to even start to look at this. But at some point, the mass is too much. The small mass that starts is the pebble in the ocean that creates a tsunami on the far shore. You can decide to be the pebble in your area, or you can decide to be the mass of water being drowning in its own self. So we have the fact that people in government, we make policies to create quotas, to keep a terror on you. And then I get this next story, this next report, just fascinating to me. Repulsive but fascinating. It's the accident you can't close your eyes to. You just got to watch the disaster happen. But here it is. They're giving notice, and this is it in a nutshell. When I see this, the government will make up these watch lists. They will cause and prosecute A war of terror on the world, on the globe, folks. And the next thing you see, the people in government places and sanctioned places, or things that are being grant moneyed and all this that are just sucking parasitically off the system, decide that they're arrogant enough to say something like this: that the government of Mars is already being planned. As James Pilato said, a media monarchy, they've declared Martian law. Thought that was pretty cute. They're declaring Martian law, folks, on you. They're declaring a government for Mars already. And you really need to see this, because from the beginning of where this is coming from, through the impositions that they tell you they're going to be imposing already, as some organization, legal entity, non-governmental organization, advancing the idea that we should make some international sounding pact for the governments on Mars. It's the example of the height of arrogance that you're dealing with right now under sustainable development, the global governance, the EU, the big demand, the big deal about Brexit, which we'll get to in a moment, just for a touch and base. It comes right out of Seattle, folks. If you don't understand about Seattle, Nikki Rapana was out of there. She's now in Alaska. She does. She has a view about this, some sustainable development. She dealt with these people up in Seattle. It's the pit, one of the main pits of the stinking abyss that which Agenda 21 and sustainable development issues out. So that it originates there is not really of a surprise. But you see the power, the seat of gravity here of the power who's making decisions already. They started back, at least back as 2010. They're going to go through various treaties. If you look at what those treaties are, I won't read them, all the agreements, and they start, well, we're going to use the Antarctica Treaty and all this other stuff to bring this administration of justice, a government to Mars. Elon Musk is involved. If you don't think this is a futuristic thing, for as much as I appreciate what he's doing, there's this other side. It's like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde-ish stuff. I think there is a strong humanitarian argument for making life multiplanetary, Musk told Eon magazine. Who is he to declare about another planet? Yeah, I know we're touching on the idea. Maybe there's someone already there, but I don't know. Maybe there's nobody there. What happens we get to these ideas at some point? We think we're so arrogant. Mankind is so arrogant that we're going to go to a place that looks like it's uninhabited, that there's no natives there. And we're doing the same conquering destruction that we've done everywhere else on this planet. Who are we to say that we can construct governments for another planet? What if the people there don't want you? And when you start putting your laws together because you have to make a government because you can't get along, isn't that telling you maybe we shouldn't stride out to other planets until we can get that squared up amongst ourselves? You see, these UN treaties they respond to are centralized global governance control, administrative bureaucracy. It's an overburden. It's just a drag on everything. And this is what these people are so arrogant to believe they can produce for another planet. The governing body proposed by the Blue Marble Institute is called the Mars Secretariat. Who are these people? What if Mars doesn't want it? So there's just so much. When you see the words, it's like just shocking that we actually entertain this nonsense. It's right out of the global governance arrogant bastages rule book. They're already making designs on Mars. This wasn't just this science project that was going on to see what we could do and how far we could go and how we could investigate in other lands. No, they're making governments for other planets. Well, that's still so far away from what I understand Star Trek was about, although they don't tell us how the Galactic Federation got involved and why there's two warring factions of two alien species in the world, with their allies. No one looked past that problem. So how about if we just make the rule, we just shut these people down, we stop declaring Martian law, and we don't go to another planet until we can work out our differences. When we can all live together without government, then maybe we should be able to go and invite ourselves, if you will, at least get on the precipice and knock on the door of an alien planet and then find out if there's anybody there and then ask if there is, if maybe we could visit for a while. Who are we, any of mankind here? We cannot live with each other. Why did some of these people think that they can live with everybody? They got a thought in their mind on how it works. What if that's not we know it's not going to be consistent with everybody. No, they resort to consensus and they get your buy-in and they do all these things that you don't even know about yourself against you. How about we just make the resolution right now? We don't go to another planet and make no government until we can go out and visit planets without government. When we can finally live amongst ourselves without declaring war and beating everybody up for whatever reason, then maybe we might be at the point we can make this discussion again. But listening to this, even as cute as it was, declaring Martian law, I'm almost speechless. The arrogance that we are. And I'm hoping that calling that out a little bit shows, really, it's not in me to be that arrogant. I mean, we may all have our arrogance, but we may have our self, we may have to determine ourself and how we go about things. But to expand that out and say that what we know is better than for everyone and another planet has to be the example of an insanity that must be constrained to this planet. And so all y'all that are in Seattle around that group, and maybe those that can contact them through internet and whatever all, need to focus some attention on that nonsense. And keep pressing them. How are you an authority when you have a fallen nature that will actually believe that you can make a rule that requires an arbitration? How about the fact that you need to do that is the problem? Impliedly I'm saying we'll never get off this planet, folks. It's not in us, folks. It's just the arrogance that I hear that wants to make itself so altruistic. It's a reflection of us still on here that is killing us here. And that's notwithstanding the wonder that to be able to go and do all that would be. That experience would just be really cool. Well, except for the fact they still haven't figured out how to get the radiation Van Allen belts to stop radiating enough to hurt us. That really puts that question on that moon stuff, doesn't it? They still haven't figured that out. How'd they do it the first time? Why didn't they learn 30, 40 years ago about that? But they can't do it now. They got to test for it now. So not only are we technologically constrained, and probably for good reason. If there's a creator of the system, that was why. That fallen nature that's in us is not going away, and we had so many restrictions that, it is a feat. It really is the feat of creativity, the tapping into the creativity to escape the prison we needed to be put in because of the dynamic that's working on under the skin that no one wants to pay attention to. The reason why we are continually at each other's throats, killing each other, wantonly, willfully, without any regard. Every excuse is made to do it. We all put up with the story about the Colonel Wood saying, pointing out, instead of what he had to point out, he points out that some transports didn't get permission, impliedly saying that was why the whole thing failed. That's a lie. That's an outright lie. He's telling you the truth, but it's a lie what the point is, compared to what the truth is. That's still only one had the answer. The unwon had the answer here all the time. But you're going to be fed a question. This happens, to me, it's just object lessons. This very method happens almost everywhere. And it happened, and I just happened to finish a major project. We did a claim, a notice of claim. It was a deadline thing. I was just kind of locked into that for quite a few days, almost all last week. Just got it done, and this Brexit vote popped up. And maybe it was just a flight of downtime, I guess. All the things I take downtime on. I watched a computer monitor some more about this vote for the British exit. Okay, so I'm glad I did, because it pointed out more of this nonsense. I didn't expect it, actually. I didn't really have a mind of it. I was in another space in my mind. But watching this vote that happened in Britain, the lies that come out, the propaganda, the sales jobs, everyone has their position. They want to get you to buy their stuff. So that's okay. I mean, I understand I understand advertising, that part. I get all that. But there's an underlying dynamic in the world that's no good. It's just no good. I want to see better, but I just can't find it in the major players of the world. It's no good. I can't trust anything looks like it's any good, even though I wanted to see UK or Britain or whoever they want to call themselves now. I see people saying UK and Britain and the Crown and the Queen. All these people, like different entities. You got to look at that, because they are different titles having different interests all together. That a lot of this noise, and we can't even get together. We couldn't make a European Union. Was Europe before individual nations? They couldn't make a union. No, UK wants out, and I'm agreeing with it. They needed out, but every nation needed out. They needed not to be bought into what Britain actually created with this is all put together, like the Lisbon Treaty, and this is all put together by Britain and other powers in the United States and some others, all kind of puppet masters behind the scenes. So for the people, I wanted independence for the British people. And apparently those that are suffering underneath austerity, that global order of austerity, shared prosperity, do not miss that one. Shared prosperity is something that they're doing, and they're going to continue. That's what my concern about all this is. I wanted the people to come out. Their Labor Party didn't actually go with their Labor Party. The people that are working and already feeling austerity wanted out. I hear lots of people saying they're ignorant and undereducated, but when you're under the thumb and you're the one that has to be the worker bee, you don't need to be educated more than to know that you're the one that's under the thumb, do you? And you want the pain to stop. This was an example of what happens underneath this global order, which I'm going to tell you, be careful to think that this is going away. So right after this vote, the people vote themselves to. It wasn't even a decision-making vote either. You really have to look at all this dynamic. That you see that it wasn't a decision-making vote. That they voted in a very narrow margin to get out of the EU. And I'm supportive of it. But I'm supportive of it for maybe a different reason than I think the reason has been created and planned and now executed to have happened. That the question came out right after the vote to get out, the people want to get out, how the UK could be forced to remain in the EU after a Brexit win. And I found this interesting, as this was going more along my thoughts as I was watching the reports coming out that night of the vote. And I was pretty heavily on Twitter, putting out little reports here and there, my insights as I was listening to people talk. You could hear the plan being developed and expanded, and there's something underneath it, and I was just responding to those things that you hear me talk about here periodically, but specific to the conversation wrapped around the vote. And you noticed how many people didn't know anything about it. Nothing. No one had a prediction that could have been right on this. I had an inkling I would like to see for the British people that they would exit and become a nation again. But that's a two-part problem. It's not over for those people. They have to step up and grab the bull by the horns. They have to do correctly now for themselves. They can't leave it back over But what was the first thing that came out when Cameron was speaking at the first light of day? He resigns, he says. And then what was the dangling Chad? Oh, I'm resigning in October. And you just heard in all that news that they were going to have to go back in under the Lisbon Treaty, Article 50, to make a commitment to extract themselves. And right there you see that there's a play afoot. Cameron's not immediately resigning, even though he should. He's going to wait a few months. While these progressives, now they tell us it's progressive, these globalists are going to plan how they're going to move this thing along. Because they need some of the advantages and no disadvantage from the EU, but they have certain other things that they can't get involved with. But right was the story the next morning. If Britain votes to leave EU, Thursday it'll be final. Actually, this was just anticipating the vote. Irreversible, irrevocable, no appeals, no second chances. This was the threat on the people. But they were explaining a dynamic within the condition. One of which was you have to make the request and then you have to go through the process. And they said, well, that process will take a couple of years. They're already laying the stage and the foundation for this thing to be drag their feet. Okay? So there's another plan afoot, folks. You just have to look through this. Another story was coming out. Germany worries France and others could follow UK in leaving the EU. There was a domino effect certainly sitting here, what they called the EU apocalypse, I think would happen. Now, Germany's now looking on the hook for all this. And we found out, even though they said that $18 billion was having to be paid by Britain to get half back, who would enter into that deal, I don't know, but that's what they did, that when Britain was going to be out of the EU, it was only going to cost Germany $3 billion to come up with the difference for it being out. Showed there was another fiscal fraud going on what it costs. You get that part of this story. That was after the story, an interesting and funny Twitter that came out that I attributed. I think it was originated by a Walid Karam. Other people took credit without reference. I think this guy is the one may have started it, but if I'm in error, that's okay. It's good enough here. What's after Brexit was the question right before this point that the dominoes in the Europe may fall. The European Union may fall apart and reinstitute the nations was a very real thing that may or may not happen. But someone said, well, what's next after Brexit? British exit. There's Grexit, the Greek exit. Departugal. Italy. Checkout. Austria, Finnish, Slovlong, later Via, and Bygium. Everyone leaves, folks. Now, until it becomes germ-lonely. Germany's holding the bag on this. If the dominoes start falling, was stated right before this question about the so-called Germany's worried about all this leaving. Well, this may be a lot of hand-wringing for nothing, but maybe not. And this is where I've been watching very carefully, and I don't have any insight more than to watch this stuff and watch the methods that they use and watch the play that's afoot. And my main thought was that, and then I found out a little bit later, if it's true, what I saw, a son came out with the Queen on the page and said that the Queen, wants to leave, wants Brexit. That triggered my thought of what I've been holding out a long time. When you look at the history in Britain and British rule and all where it holds and the holdings of the Queen, the Britain can't actually get into the EU with any hard, tangible connections for any length of time. It's one of the ultimate sovereigns in the world. So the sovereignty cannot be subjected to this administrative unit called the European Union. But so when I saw that confirmed my thoughts that this was a motion that it had to come out. So now what we're looking at is the question also is, was this vote rigged? And the outcome looks like it didn't need to be if it was, but there's earmarks that it was. because they needed this vote to go out. They needed not to let the government make the decision, but have the will of the people on their side, because they need Britain out. They need it separate. They need it separate for a lot of reasons. One will be if they want to do independent war, or they want to work independently with the United States or any other country, if they want to keep their holdings separate, if they don't want to be subject to the rules, the laws, and all these other things, they don't want to pay more money out in certain directions, they want to free it up to go some other directions. That if it was the Queen's will to get out, they just needed to get the people to underwrite it. That they would want to rig the vote. In this case, it looks like maybe they didn't have to, but it was so close as to even be a question there. And here's why they had to have it close. If it's a close call, the question about on a voter by voter number, the question about rigging is a lot lessened, and it's easier to get it over by one vote and still have it rigged. No one notices that it was rigged because they didn't have to do the big adjustment. So you see the setup to get the question, to make it a close call, that allows them to do a rigging of sorts, in fact, that keeps it close but pushes it in the direction they have to have it go. So what's the point about this ultimately? I told you this war is ultimately driven by the financial, fiscal, or monetary control over the world. This is what the bureaucratic governance is. And so my mind is kind of focused on that a lot. It doesn't mean it's an absolute, but I'm wanting to look at this way because it affects our lives in the United States, not directly, but because it's the monetary control that we were told in the 90s was coming. That this exit actually starts to bring and fulfill. That this was a shell game of sorts for the EU. What they really actually wanted was the creation of the euro. And that everybody agreed that the euro was a monetary standard by which they could do commerce amongst themselves, amongst the disparate nations. This and the domino effect, whether or not it happens, is irrelevant with the establishment of the euro as a moderating monetary system. The EU can fall apart now that they've got the monetary system established to agree to. You can fall out but still agree to that monetary standard. Why? So you have par with all the different national currencies. Now let me bring in the idea that I told you before about Ron Paul. If he backed in his theory about what the monetary system was and the fiscal system should be against a Keynesian model, if he backed it right up against what they did when the Keynesian model destroyed us, he would further drive us down by enforcing what was supposed to be our responsibilities when we had nothing. There had to have been a transition. And so here's what we have, and Trump comes into this. It's all like riding the wave of history, you see. He comes up wanting to make America great. As soon as the Brexit happens, he's in Scotland, of all places that voted against, but to remain. He goes there and does the thing and said, well, they just made independence, and America can be great too. He couples his mission statement with that. It's completely irrelevant, but he couples it for people in their mind. That this starts to look more and more like a fiscal monetary coup. I said, people are going to have to handle on to this because they've got the plan running and no one really maybe sees it. That when they established the euro to moderate the parity of the nations, they could split them back up and still have the parity with the monetary system. But what is always the overriding agreements in the world but the special drawing right? As I told you back in 2009 or something, we were talking about that. Look to the special drawing right. They were making a lot of noise about it. That was the parity of the nations in the world, not just Europe. And so what it looks like they're doing is that whether or not the EU stays together, they have the monetary parity that's there that sits underneath the SDR, which is controlled by whom? But the same players. The Bank of International Settlements, the Fed, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and then you may see an alliance later with BRICS. All based on the special drawing rights basket of currencies, which are global. That you see, that's the reason, one good reason why England needs to pull out of this. Has nothing to do with anything relevant to what people are involved in. That they want a way to provide now, you'll see possibly, national currencies entering back into the everywhere that's now wanting to separate, and the dominoes could fall. Those that don't may continue to use the EU because that's the moderating factor. It doesn't matter. Some will drop out, and as we were told back in the 90s, the United States would have two currencies. One in domestic, which would look like the international. They would still look like a $100 bill, but they would have different functions. And they would control the people with that currency domestically like they'll control Europe or whoever has their own national currency. And it could be based in gold. It could be anything, because it's subject to an overriding fiction. So I want to give us a different scope on this a bit. I hope I'm not just talking nonsense here, because it made more sense to me the way I was looking at all this thing, how it was happening. This was a plan, folks. This had to go this way. And it had to go by the plan before it, which is the global governance condition of the financial construct of this world, whether it be monetary or fiscal policies. And then I came up, it's just fascinating to come across this. And again, the internet's a wonderful thing to find it. On that, I just went through kind of my thoughts there's lots to go through what I was watching all night. Again, the words that they were telling us, these progressives are in there, folks. They're a stench. You're not get out. They're still working their magic. So I don't know where the nations go. But the monetary system is now given license to free up and do the under thing that you don't notice. They give you something you can use, that you just use that. There's nothing that you're going to see a change in your life. What they change is your relationship and your buying power relative to the global standard, which the players are involved in. They also can get rid of the fix, because the fix is in, because it's now monitored. You're not even touching it now. They've got it elsewhere. They've translated it out. They don't have to have that fix anymore. That's probably why we've been watching the fix being exposed. It's going to be eliminated from our perception because it's done at the monetary and fiscal policy level. Remember, I hope you all notice this. They're espousing about how fast the British pound fell with the question of the vote. After Remain looked like it came in and it was doing a slight rise, as soon as it looked like Brexit was coming, the pound, they said, fell. They fell a historic drop. But I looked at that, and I think most of us who looked at this realized that what you're looking at was the speculators leaving the market. So you watch what you're looking at. They're saying that's a great value that was lost, when in fact what you're looking at is the speculators fleeing the market. And you're watching the plunder that they have been putting on the currency, that it dropped from 144 to the dollar, pound to the dollar, down to 133. I saw as low that night. 15% of its value had dropped in just hours. Historic failure of the pound, if you can get it, if you think that's what happened. And they were claiming great deals, and the next day 600 points in the S&P, I think, the Dow. That was hardly nothing, folks. And it was all speculation on top of that people were making big hay about. In fact, when it all stopped, I looked last night, the pound rose 3 cents against the dollar. So it got a third of its drop back. So maybe some of the speculators came back in, because you and me, our need for this money doesn't change very much from day to day. And so they made great hay over the fact of this drop, this precipitous, historic drop, when it was just the speculators that plunder our systems that we saw going out of the system. That it recovered pretty quickly. It recovered to the extent that it's not dropping precipitously because someone decided to get out of somewhere, which tells you the British pound's pretty solid as far as a basket of currency consideration for the SDR basket. And it's irrelevant to the euro at this point. But it had to be in play, didn't it? The pound. Doesn't matter what its value is, because it's going to be averaged by the basket. So I don't claim to be the economist. I don't claim to be the great analyst. I really don't even look at this stuff. But there's just certain things and triggers that seem to keep popping up that call for a different analysis. what it really shows us is that there's still something in play, absolutely working. And if we don't step in at the people of these nations don't step up and take control, this is our opportunity to throw out the controllers, throw out the governance condition, try to get back to a solid currency that the people can use and not be speculated on and not be derivatized, if I can say that. We might see a less chaotic world. One other thing I noticed about Britain coming out, even though they're actually in war right now, the most warmongering nation, one of the most warmongering nations is Britain. Don't forget that. But if they were out and independent, they were talking about not getting any business in the world and they have things to provide. Well, that just makes them having to go to private contract. What did everybody do before the euro, folks? And they said it. The European Union and the euro was just an experiment anyway. Was that like the American experiment, folks? Is this the changing of your lifestyle without your permission over and over? Well, possibly, and looks like it. This was an experiment anyway. I think it's the experiment. Did they catch on in time? They started catching on. They're going to adjust now. And so I just want you to be aware, your life will be controlled by monetary systems and instruments now, and they're going to go cashless, so it gets rid of a lot of more problems. This is going to be another layer of control that just makes an insulation between you and that system, is what Brexit starts to get us to see as possible. And so the internet, I go around and I found this statement, an interesting article. Whether or not I completely am integrated with the terminology they use to fluff up their knowledge, or what I saw was just a fluffing of knowledge, right after the first few paragraphs, they started getting to the point. I have to go with it and could agree to a large extent of what the statement is, that I think you need to see. It's maybe better stated than what I can tell you. Brexit, the new modern nationalism, is global governance. In that title is this point, Europe becoming their nations again. I'm going to call them nation states. That just shows you they're tied into a global governance system. But nationalism, the nation becoming great again on its own currency, so-called, is actually the new global governance. Is a title of an article that just popped up like the day or so at the time or the time after that Brexit vote, is what I'm talking about, folks. I couldn't believe that there was, here it is. Someone else is seeing this condition. They call it modern nationalism. I thought we were post-modern, so I've got a little question on their identities, their use of the words, and this and that and the other. I'm not that much into it. They could be perfectly right. I don't know. I don't get into that terminology much. But they expose how a plan has been going all the time and what they're doing, and this is just the next step in the plan to get the next thing to move, where you think your nationalism, and this is where the key for us in America is, that your nationalism is what is you are proud about and you start supporting, and that's the bait. And isn't it true that Trump is coming out to make America great again on this position of creating a nationalism pride? That I'm telling you, as I told you before, this stuff is used against you eventually. Here's all that's going to happen that happens in this. They get you pounded. And I'm not against the United States. I told you why I think the United States is a great place. It's not because of the politics. It's because of what we did with our property, land laws, and our disposal laws, and our relationships and all that, and the hierarchy that we have that's supposed to be maintained, if you can keep it. Now, we got that to work on. We got to get it back. But what they do is they get your nationalism up. They get your nationalism going. This sounds a little bit like Hitlerish, but let's not get too wild on that. It's the same mechanism. That Trump comes along and wants to get you all prideful in the nation, and he's going to tell you how he's going to fix America. And you go, yeah. As absurd as some of the things he's saying, you're going, yeah, USA, make America great again. And you're proud with that. And that's okay, I guess. But what happens one day after they get you past the rah-rahs, kind of like the Hope and Change crowd, but they're going a different way, and they say, well, I'm going to fix America, and I'll make America great again because I'm going to do this with the currency. Let's say he says we're going to go to gold-backed money now. And you go, rah, 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 make it so. We got specie. Well, you don't, but that's okay. No one understands that part. They don't realize it had to come from the States for that to happen, but let's just keep going. Rah, 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 Trump's going to fix it. America great again. I'm going to throw in $1 that looks like it's supported by gold. And you don't know that when he did that, he actually brought you subservient to the SDR, in fact, by other monetary agreements elsewhere. You're done, folks. I mean, it's over. And then they go to digital, because that's how they'll probably bring that in. Oh, you got your digits, and they'll go back by gold. Well, what a weird system that would be. But you're all going, rah, 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 he's going to Make America Great Again. I'm going to go with it. They're setting it up for the takedown again, folks. And Brexit, I believe they needed to do it. The people need to do it because they need to be an independent nation with their independence and not be conglomerated into governance. But, it's like our problem, we're crickets everywhere. There's not enough people that take control in actual proper action. That is our problem. And they are planning on that. And I want you to see at least this. If I'm wrong, I just wasted some of your time here. If I'm not, you need to see it coming, folks. Or some nuance of it. Maybe I'm not exactly right, but look for it. If some of you may not have been aware and heard about it, but in the 90s they were going to go to a dual currency for the United States. And this cashless society is perfect for that, just perfect. Because it gets rid of even the evidence of the tangibility of even the note that you owe, the bill that you've agreed to pay. What they do to us. Oh man. To me, that's a funny joke to me for some reason. I don't know, folks. That was my little comedy skit right there. We pass around all these things right on them and says, this is a bill you're handing someone else. And the other one says, okay. China reaffirms its support for EU integration. Was part of that paper. The world of today has experienced profound and complex changes. Remember, the Lagarde was saying we're going to transform world economies and we're going to undo 150 years of steady state and going to put in this new system. China's in on it, folks. People of China, listen. Those of you that may tune in. This article, you really kind of need to read it. It goes through all the stuff we've been talking about. It's a report that was done. It talks about peace and security and prosperity and trade and investment, industry, information, agriculture, transportation, infrastructure, sustainable development. It's all here, folks. This article speaks to what I've been saying. I couldn't have really said it better, actually. But it reflects the awareness that and it may be a notice. These people may be the notice. They even bring Trump in. It's this thing that they're bringing in. Whether even Trump knows of how this works. This is how they're doing it. I think he possibly knows, actually. It's too on point of how you do this. It's almost why you can almost hear him too cocky about what he's doing in a way. Although, there's a lot of pressure to get Hillary in. It doesn't matter. They're going to go one way. The Rhino con Hillary, they get the war machine. America great, they get the monetary machine without the war. It's the same exceptionalism they've been pushing down everyone's throat everywhere. So maybe I should stop there. I'd like to have you read this article and go to the blogcaster, get the link. The new Modern-Nationalism is global government. I can't tell you how much on point that title is with how I've been watching what they've done. The sustainable development in our nation is global governance already in practice in the United States, folks. It's what our lawsuit joins, even though the criminals are going to keep robbing the banks they can get away with. There's a method that imposes all of what I've just told you in a short list. There's even more, on and on and on. It's everything in your life. Everything about your life is involved in these reports that this condition through the Brexit starts to provide the conduit to achieve. And Trump's American First policy fits right into it. And so they get you to agree to him. It's a good idea. I'm not saying what he's saying is necessarily we want to make ourselves much better. But see, they drove us down to nothing, and so we have to go for something. We haven't lost all respect. And so instead, for me, instead of being led by the nose by the leaders, the leaders hooked onto the hook that's got the bait that you glom on in the coming out of the group that you're in, the grouper that you is, you bite onto that bait, they yank you out with the hook, with the leader, and club you in the head. You can't have a leader. If you're not attracted to the thing on the end of a leader, you probably have a better chance not being clubbed in the head. These kinds of reports to us tell us that that's the dynamic, that there's somebody up the line of that leader, got a pole, and he's fishing you. Again, I keep looking at this story. I want to read it, but it's so profound, actually, in its confirmation of how Brexit becomes the fulfillment of the monetary controls at another level that insulates you from the knowledge, insulates you from its effect. You won't see it. It's the way they work that. In other words, when the nations are looking to the euro, even though there's no European Union, and they all claim to be independent, even so, it doesn't matter whether they're together or apart now, they claim unity in the euro. How they trade, your life is controlled by it. And when that's subject to the SDR, your life, you've got local money and independent money, and they can treat each one independent, and one doesn't affect the other because they have the policy. You don't need trade agreements now. Your monetary system controls everything. You have to agree. Remember what they did, what the United States did to Iran through the SWIFT payments. I think it was a SWIFT payment system. They said, don't pay Iran. Don't let Iran access to the system. If you don't agree, you're cut out. I want you to go to cashless society, folks. If you don't agree, you're cut out. Oh, they entice you maybe with a few dollars with the gold backing. Oh, yeah, they'll get everyone for that if they go there. I don't know if they have to, but at any rate, so there's a bigger play going on, folks. I hope I've given it some respect. I hope I treated it fairly enough to give you an insight to look. At least keep looking. Don't get too lost in the fact that some people said we want to get out of the EU because we knew that was the EU was the global plan. Well, yeah, it was part of the plan, folks. Don't forget that. It's just part. It's a tool. It's just a tool. Remember all these things, even the Martian law being declared. All reference these UN things. Remember, your civil rights, your fundamental rights, they call you animal rights, the human rights that they give you through all of these policies is all subject to central control and state, what they call the state need. Don't ever forget that. If they need you to be living in austerity, that's what you get. If your monetary policy gives you some domestic money, they control that. You go into austerity and you don't even know it. And if you don't like it, you don't even get that much. They pulled your electronic card. Oh, you got to get a new SIM card. To get a new SIM card, you have to make new agreements. You got to make some more meetings. But then you got to pay us the tax for doing that because you're just so out of it. That you come subject, all your so-called fundamental rights, those things that they think that someone out there gave you, like these people, the marble people in Seattle talking about making Martian law. We're going to tell you up there ain't nobody there yet, and if there is, we don't care that you're there. The new natives. We're going to make a law for your planet. Just because we're do-gooders and we do good for the rest of the universe. Do-gooders are us, universally. That you are subject to their fabricated reality. Remember, they make stuff up. You give them a little bit of a quota, they run with it. Oh, man, I'll make profit on making my quota. I'll get my job placement. I'll be able to go up the ranks. I get more money per week. I get to tell someone else how to be that he's a jerk. And for that, all I got to do is put a name on a report once a month. You got it. How much more are these people getting money, this parasitic money, that all they're going to do is figure out a way to make a leverage funding on the taxation the people in Seattle are paying to come up with these things? Yeah, I'd make a grant agreement every week if I had to. Who cares? Show me the money. And I get to make policy for everybody else? You got it. That's a deal I can get into. Now, who wouldn't? I mean, that's part of us, I guess, right? Now, there's a few of us that may not. But it's out there and it's happening. And so your rights against these people, and it's, again, a military consequence imposing a monetary control. Remember, they said, I don't care who causes the vote or makes the vote or what the vote is, as long as I I control the monetary policy. See, it doesn't matter once you control the life, blood, and currency of everybody. You don't get it. You get the fallout from it. And anybody who deals in that system has to agree. And if they don't, you starve. And they got you starving anyway. Remember, I told you long time ago, I hadn't thought about this a long time, you're going to be eating pilot crackers, wishing you could get the saltine. And you'll kill someone to get the saltine. And this is the world that we live in. That someone else declares the reality for you and you agree with it because you don't stand up and take the hard knocks and hardship it takes to stop that crime against you. And we get these systems that get into place, even though you hear there's a fundamental right. Oh, we have the right to free speech, and we have the right to incorporate to be part of these plans, or we have a right to put input on the public meetings. And here, I want to give you the example of this future coming. If you hadn't already seen it, LAPD arrests an 81-year-old for speaking, quote, off topic, close quote, at a public forum. Because some bureaucrat running the meeting felt this 81-year-old black man who has apparently more knowledge about the subject matter of the law that he's talking about, referencing what this police board commission was meeting about. He has more knowledge than that whole body because he referenced a city other than what he was sitting in. They said that he was off topic and took this black man out and beat him down and got him out of the meeting. And I can't remember if they arrested him. Oh, he was arrested, excuse me, as I look up at the subtitle. Tut Hayes, 81-year-old black man, was arrested while giving public testimony. He is said to have been off topic within seconds of speaking and summarily dragged from the podium. So this is your sustainable development. This is how they can do it to you and profess that prosperity and growth occurs. See, it's the growth of their tyranny that they're talking about, and the prosperity is your shared prosperity, which is austerity. It's all in their documents. I read it behind the woodshed. I don't make this stuff up. I really am not that sharp. I'm a miner. We move rocks. I was happy moving rocks. And then someone purported to say that I can't move my rocks no more. I needed something to do. Here I'm 12 years later, I'm doing this. You could too, folks. They ain't liking this, what I do now. They should just left me alone. And you could be that way too. But it's coming down, you're arrested for free speech because some bureaucrat determined that he had more say than your free speech. There was no due process about that. No, it's a bureaucracy. The one sitting in the seat of decision decides for you. This is conditional free speech. That's what your human rights are. Conditional fundamental rights. As long as it meets the state's needs. Don't underestimate the power of this story. That it's a black man, I don't want to put too much on race, but that it's a black man talking about the fact of minorities being not accounted for properly in police policy. Remember I told you got to go and get the policy done? This is evidence of what goes on. Maybe go a little different than what this guy's doing, but this is what's happening. Someone who's researched the law, who presents himself, mentions Orlando because of the subject matter they're talking about in this city had to do with the gay rights and all this other stuff. You see now what happens in the division here. That because he mentions Orlando and not Los Angeles, they say he's out of turn. Is the allowance of which is our problem in this nation. It is sustainable development. You're seeing these bureaucrats in action. You're watching these holier than thou. I can declare Martian law good on everybody. So I'm going to do it to you attitude. Using what we have found in our lawsuits, methods that are felony, treason to our way of life in at least the United States of America. And I hear crickets. Is it just a wonder to me. Talk about shock and awe. Yeah, I can stand there with my mouth open quite a long time. Maybe if this time of year fly go into it or something, but wow. Crickets just doesn't even cut that one. But here's what you have in this world. You're allowing this to happen to this man. It's going to happen to you. I want to read. I keep wanting to read because it's interesting to read how this happens, but I really don't want to read. I want you to go to the broadcaster or go right now when you hear me. And I didn't do it earlier, did I? I forgot to give you the code. For those of you that are still hanging in our past cast, it's our BTWRLM168 is the broadcaster link. You put that number, that code BTWRLM168 in a search engine with behind the woodshed, and you should get the content page. You can get this link. You read this stuff. You figure this out. You start putting in your computer how far we've gone from what it should be. And what I keep telling you is a military consequence in these police. Because you have to, otherwise it's coming on you. This is one that went out to try and slow this thing down. And this is how you get treated. You have to have an answer for that. You know what my immediate answer to this was? But not an answer. It's just a response. Because they're showing you they're criminals. And you just call that out. This is all you have to do. When he came up to set up his speech and give a public testimony, and they determined under a color of authority that it was not relevant without hearing it, that commissioner committed a felony, and he deprived of fundamental input right he had under the statute. That I would reverse charge that commission, whoever that bureaucrat was, for a felony deprivation of fundamental right under color of authority. Then I would do coercion, and I might actually go after the cops as well for not knowing the distinction. Now you say, well, what's the remedy? Oh, you're just going to go report. Fine, make the report. Follow it up. Go to risk management. When these people don't do their constitutional duties that have an oath, you make criminal constitutional complaints. File that with risk management, this big corporate insurance company. Make the record. Don't just watch this and do nothing. Don't be the victim of it and not respond. Become the porcupine, folks. You're nice and docile. You just go eat your whatever you eat. And when they pick you up and you're not supposed to pick up, you poke them. You stick them with whatever you got. And you find things to stick them with. You stick them everywhere. You grab wherever you got a quill to come out, it comes out. And you teach them, don't touch me. If you touch me, I'm going to make your life miserable. Yes, it's a big pain. But when we didn't, they got to where they're getting an 81-year-old man, take him down for sitting up in front of a police commission's board to tell them, here's an example somewhere else of what you need to be careful of, and we need to make this thing better. No, they don't want to do that. They're sitting there to wield their power as a bureaucrat. And I'm suggesting to you strongly to look at your felony theft by extortion and your felony coercion statutes as a help to have a powerful statement beyond just a violation, a parking ticket, but felony action by people in oaths of office. That's a second felony. Under a fiduciary breach, that's a third wrong. And you don't make it a question. You tell them they've done it. You point it out. You say, no, you've done it. And if you say that you didn't do it, then you did another felony. You're aiding and abetting. And where do I go with that? I've told you before. We started out at 18 U.S.C. 4. I'm the one saying there's an arrest. You, now in the seat of decision, have to find it out and make the arrest. Or have a darn good reason why it's not. And when you don't, you become an 18 U.S.C. 3 felon as an accessory. Is this so hard, folks, as I say it, to have it for you? And I'm not saying it, doing it because you think you sound smart when you say it. No, you go after only these things that are infringements, substantive, foundational infringements under people that think that they are the authorita, and they think that they are the authority. I hear people complaining about all kinds of things. I see no one stepping up with any kind of a plan, even if it's a mistake. I appreciate someone that steps up. I'm going to do this and this and this, and I notice, well, maybe that's not really what they need to do, but at least they want to try something. And then I'll jump in because I don't want to see anybody hurt a lot of times. I'll say, well, why don't you consider this and look over here and look over here and now rethink about what you were going to do. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, good. Try that. Again, there's ways that you don't have to make yourself in jeopardy to what you want to see happen around you. The stories we told, folks. Do you think that guy of free speech wanting to tell something, make his military better, his police better, he gets beat down by the military, by the police, drag him out? Do you think this next guy is going to suffer that, folks? And we hear these stories about the lies and the tales, and we got to make the victimhood that gets put on us, that we have to take as a burden that we cross, that we bear. Man who claimed he escaped Auschwitz admits the story is a lie. Do you think he's going to be beat down like a black man trying to talk about to the police? Wait a minute, your policies are kind of screwed up. Let's put some sanity in them so you don't do what happened in Orlando. Go in and swat a bunch of people 3 hours after it happened. Do you think this guy lying about Auschwitz is going to suffer that consequence? Now, he's 91-year-old, Pennsylvania man who has for years lectured to school groups and others about what he said were experiences at Auschwitz, now says he was never a prisoner at the German death camp in Nazi-occupied Poland, where Germany or Hitler went over to rescue their German people, remember? And oh man, these stories. You think this guy, this 91-year-old, get beat down like the 81-year-old got beat down for actually trying to do something over this lie? Going to schools and universities and talk shows and all what he's done. I apologize. Okay, fine. Now what? Oh, I take responsibility. Okay, now what? Do you think this freedom of speech is really equal? And here's my real point about this. When you look and you see that freedom of speech is not equal, and it does not have the same accountability, and that is not equal either, the accountability, and there accountability where there ought not be any. What reality do you think you're living in the form of a government? What government could you put the name on that allows that you are the one that was required to keep? Contrary. I don't know what to answer for you, folks. That is your answer. As long as we remain silent on these discrepancies, these people get away with creating that division. How many people have been hurt on the lie, at least of this one, over Auschwitz, is another sort of crime beyond, folks, that will not and does not enjoy any accountability. In fact, they get paid more. I don't know if you just heard, a historic amount of money got sent over back to Israel over this thing that who set up, folks, but Britain. Helped. They were party to it. Britain. See, it's a closed circle, folks. We give leniency where none is needed, and we beat down on people that are trying to do good and dedicate their life to try and do good or do better. And we sit as crickets to that. It's a crime on its own. It's a crime on its own what we do to ourselves. Freedom of speech. You have a right to speak. Now they have the right to go anywhere to find it. Federal court, the Fourth Amendment, does not protect your home computer. We touched a little bit about this. It keeps coming up. A dangerously flawed decision unsealed today. That's the reason why I put it in here. You get to see what they're saying. Now, I wanted to just point this point out here, folks. This has to do with that playpen story. Why would, when you read this case, why would a court sui sponte, S-U-A-S-P-O-N-T-E, sua sponte, on the court's own motion, why would the court make a decision on its own motion to make the decision and then seal it? Well, when you read the motion, when you read the decision, you start finding out, well, there's a bunch of problems. EFF sees their own. I see the judge has a little bit of reason, but it's all based on a faulty premise. But why would the court move on its own motion to kind of take care of business and then seal that answer from most everybody if it was a quality answer? So I needed you to see this. You need to read, again, the subtleties are really what's in front of us that we don't recognize. To me, I noticed that was one of many in the case. I don't have the time to really discuss it all. I'd like to have you all read it and then say, well, okay, I read it, know what we were talking about, or I noticed this, or did you notice that, and we can get some kind of dialogue going, then I know that you're interested, and when I know you're interested, we can really go pretty quickly like I did in the UC-wide chat. I hope what I offered was useful. It seemed to be at least a place for people to start reading and sources of documentation to clarify their thoughts on things and get the roots of especially the black and white, the law, down. I was able to put that all in one little spot. Now we have some common ground that they talk about. Yeah, it's in the law. We need to have that dialogue with us, so we don't get off into these philosophical areas, which really waste our time right now. That why would a court do that? To me, it was an interesting observation for me, that if you don't read the case and you don't have a thought about it, these details pass right by you. And with the Brexit thing, I'm not in that much, so I'm a little hesitant to say I have an insight, but I think I do. It made lots of sense to me on things I haven't even talked about that have watched in history that connect up. You have a right of freedom of speech. That's supposed to be a right to keep your speech from them as well. Does anybody use that, folks? The right of association in the First Amendment, which is a pretty powerful place in the list of amendments, the very first one, that the right of assembly is the right to not assemble. The right of association is the right not to associate. Oh, there's another one. How do they have the right to force an association on your speech? It is really a phenomenal thought in my mind. And so my next point is, okay, so now I was told that was not supposed to happen. Since it is, what kind of a system do I actually live in? I keep asking you to ask yourself that to get you all off. You think you have constitutional rights. Now, what do you live in? That's the battlefield, folks. When you figure that out, it gives you a place to go. You at least have a place to start responding. If you don't, you're the accessory, you clam up, you go wherever you go, you say, oh, I'm not going to let someone else do it. That's not me. Well, it is you. You're just going to escape. The rest of the burden comes on those that try to do something better, and they can't, because now they're too far down the road. They're now suffering underneath the SDR, the euro currency, and then the domestic national servitude. They have no ability now. And we allowed that here and now today. Supreme Court rule, if you didn't think all this stuff is going nuts, folks, Supreme Court rules cops can break the law to enforce the law. Do I need to read more about this to tell you that there's some serious things going on, and your courts are the problem? I told you we sued the Bar Association. That's the system they set up around you to do they'll make the law and enforce the law, isn't it? Make the law, execute the law, and then beat down everybody who doesn't execute it quite the way they said. A complete control structure right around you don't even see. Completely saying they can break the law in order to enforce the law. What? And here's the thing that really, again, how little it takes to really see the fact. And what I was telling y'all, what I've been telling y'all, that within this story was Sotomayor making the comment that tells you and confirms that we live essentially in a prison society. She uses a special funny word, Carceral, but it's prison. She, in dissent, she agrees. You live in a prison, an open-air prison, with these kinds of rules. So if you don't take it from me, what I've been telling you all these years, you take it from a Supreme Court justice. And this is one of the ones I would have thought may be the one I wouldn't trust. It's even violating her senses. Another link for you. You can just see it. It's right here. We have all the evidence that we don't live in the place they told us. That we have all the evidence in the world that we didn't keep the republic. And I'm suggesting to you that there's a way to get back to that. And it's not easy. It's not non-work. You can't do anything other than to go after that either. I mean, we can, I do kind of lots of things, but unless I'm working on against it, it's not getting fixed on its own. Even me talking to you today is not going after the fact that I need to either write a paper or enforce a paper or give a notice to someone to help someone else to go enforce a paper or enforce an embarrassment even. At the end of our meeting, my colleague who did the presentation about our where we had the commissioners agree to have the criminal charges against the state agencies investigated, someone in the audience asked him later, did the commissioners even know what they did? The answer of which is no. But they don't need to know as long as they just did the law, do they? As long as they did what they needed to do. That's the way it works. But they had done something that hasn't been done for any time in my life, as I've seen, looked around. How did that happen? It didn't happen by me talking here on the broadcast. It happened by working diligently to do the research, compiling that information in an understandable way, then communicating it in a document that was used as evidence in another presentation by someone else on the point of their need, presented in the proper way. It was not done on this broadcast. And so, even what I do here to help you, or hopefully help y'all, give you some insight, is for you to pick up. It doesn't solve our problem against, if you do nothing with this, it wasted my time in some regard, certainly, and it's wasting your time to listen, to not pick it up and go use it in some way. And all I can tell you is those few people that do have they just see the wrong they want to make right, and we get together. It takes a little bit of orientation of how we get to speak together on how the terminology might work and the direction that at least I see things need to do, and I refer to it. It takes just a few days to really get together, to work some stuff in a direction out that works. And like I've told you, put you on the path, and you work a lot quicker that way. That if nobody's doing that more than to listen to me, I'm wasting my time, you're wasting your time, and you're an accessory to the crime against all of us, being that each one of us had the duty. Each one of us has that duty. Supreme Court knocks a little more off the Fourth Amendment, gives cops another way to salvage illegal searches. And so, I wanted to point this part. This is that same case. But something occurred to me that that I suggest that you do, and I've done it before. I've said it before. I want to remind you about this court case. This Riley decision is really riling things up, because they're basing other decisions on it. And we have this goes through this story. I think this Tech Dirt was a good interest. And they have lots of court cases you can give, and they build everything. This Rodriguez case builds up to get us to the Strife case. It goes on and on. They build these precedences up, but I wanted to point out something about this. When you look through, see, when I'm reading what they're doing and trying to figure out, well, where are they going now? What license are they giving the government to hurt us? And what direction? You're looking for the limit. Even so that they give more license, you look for the limit. And the limit I look for is, what is the first action that allows them to grab a hold of you? They may even fabricate one, but what's the way to subvert that in the moment? I've told you, your defense is started in the first point of contact. When they contact you, is the first thing out of your mouth has to be a defense, or a comment, or of evidence, or a proof for the future defense. And let me put it into a more substantial place. As I looked at these cases here that are coming to take away our rights, there's always that limit up front. It's usually jurisdictional. That they're there underneath the pretense of something is not the law. Even if they're there now illegally, it's not the law. But you know what? If they're there illegally without the law, they don't have the right to impose law wrongly, is where I find out is their problem. Let me put this into direct fact. When a friend of the co-owner of the mining claim here last January got stopped and beat down and had his stuff stolen when he was going to the mining claim, which is what we just wrote the claim, notice of claim to the state about, where this is where I identified the money laundering the court does, and all the state officials are all in felony crimes and worse. And we went through all the process of putting all the history and the paperwork all together, and we just filed a notice of claim on all of that. The most powerful thing he did in the beginning was ask for the cops' subject matter jurisdiction. Because when you look inside these cases, they can have a misunderstanding about what they thought was in the law. They can make a wrong decision on what they thought the law was. They can actually be there wrongly now, in the case of what they thought. but they have no power to make up what they thought was law when it wasn't. And asking my friend and co-owner of the claim, and I say that referencing a property right because he had access rights that's written into law that's a crime to interfere with. And when he asked for the officer's subject matter jurisdiction, that was a critical statement. Oh, it wasn't, am I detained? That's nonsense. I told you all they have to do is answer yes, and you're done. You're detained. Now you got to wait there another 25 minutes. The question is whether or not he has the authority behind him, and he knows that. Asking the question of the subject matter jurisdiction and not having an answer one proves what he was doing was applying something that wasn't even in the law to know to have wrong. Which I want to point out to you, you need to start looking to. These cases really are refining, to a very high level, what I've been telling you. And they test me. These cases test what my knowledge is and what I've been telling you every time I read them. They're like encroachments. They're getting closer to having the answer to defeat what I've been telling you. And do you know that what I've been telling you is still absolutely what you need to be listening to do and do? Not this extraneous nonsense. You need to be on point. And that point is becoming more and more refined. I can only hope that that point stays at the ultimate end. There's a point that they cannot break. They cannot touch it. This fiduciary relationship, this having to be in the law, they can't make up a law. If they're found out to be without a law and you had a right that they didn't have a right to interfere with, that there was no law at all to get you with, they're screwed. SCROOD for all you sensitive ears. They're screwed. Now, screwed to what extent? Screwed to the extent that you persist to have pointed out, like we're doing. It's now been since January. We're now up to June. We've just did a claim, notice of claim. What did I just say? Well, the statutes tell us we have a limitation if we want to engage with the state for their wrongs or the wrongs of their what they call their employees or their agents or officers, and you have to file your paper. It's like a notice of appeal. You only have 30 days to file it after a decision. It's just a statutory thing. So you file it. And that gives you now 2 years to go file a lawsuit. Better, you create your case so that they say they better satisfy it. That's how we've done ours. It's all been perfected in summary decision. They all defaulted to answer the wrongdoing. We proved that they have no law to rely on. They have nowhere they can go in the law that they mischaracterized, that they got wrong. There is no law that they got wrong because there was no law made to intrude, use their authority to intrude, is where you have to go. I keep telling you, don't make a question on what is a fundamental right, and better to stay in points of evidence like we have for mining on the land of disposal, that we can produce a paper evidence to show the fact. Now, the work's on you to go find the corollary that they had no right to intrude. We've done that. You do that. Yes, it's a little bit orienting yourself in that environment, a little bit disorienting at first, but you get there. Certainly have to get there quicker listening to what I'm telling you to at least look. And when you qualify yourself, I've told you, trust me just enough to get you to the path you need to go down and direct you a couple points. If I can't do that, don't listen. You do not listen to me. To date, I don't know that I've put anywhere that they couldn't get quicker where they wanted to go. But it has to be someplace you want to go. You can't just be, I know the problem's out there and I'm just going to keep whining about it. Or I'm just going to sit over here and I'm going to do this thing because it looks like I'm being effectual. No, you really have to get into this thing. So I want to point out this story in Tech Dirt. It had a lot of court cases. When you go through these court cases, you're looking to see there's still a limit that's recognized. There's still a limit recognized. And the limit is now right to the bleeding edge. They cannot rely on something that can't exist. What have I told you about the jump between commerce and production? There's a chasm that they try to bridge build. And if we keep destroying the bridge, they keep trying to make common bridge building. If we keep destroying that pirate plank they keep trying to throw across our ship, our state, the ship of our state. And we don't maybe build one ourselves and go back across to their pirate ship themselves. They can't invent what they, somewhere in their state, they just got incorrect but was sitting there. If they can't point to a law that they got wrong and they invented a law that doesn't exist, they are screwed. And what you do, you don't sit back and go through your defenses. You use that fact as your offense against them in the case. And you push it to a crime. You push it to the violation against you. Why do I say that? It's not out of opinion. We just did it. When the first officer didn't understand, even when we wrote him and said I didn't respond to the subject matter jurisdiction at all. I don't even respond to your question to verify whether or not he just didn't have one, and he didn't have one by default and silence. He's perfected the fact he had no law to rely on, not even in error, folks. Can you understand that? This is not that hard. Yeah, it's odd, but it's not that hard. Did my friend say, am I detained? Absolutely not. He wanted to know what the subject matter jurisdiction was. So he gives him the probable cause to believe the guy doesn't know. If the guy doesn't know, the odds are real good he's violated a right that any one of us are working under that they have no right to violate, and they have no law they can resort to that said that they even misinterpreted it because it can't exist. Is what you'll see in these cases is still available to you. That I'm telling you, if you don't get this idea, we are just going to be we're going to be the accessories to the crime against us perpetually. It gets worse. It's just going to get worse. I don't see how it lifts up here. We keep giving them the wrong answer. They keep doing the right response. You ask the wrong question to the court, and they'll give you the right answer. 100% of the time I've seen it. And that's on top of when they make it up. Is it justice? Absolutely not. So stop expecting it. This is a war. And you have to understand the battlefield, and it starts at the first point of contact. It actually starts before that, but we'll start here for this sake. So what did we do? We made a record. There is no law that they can rely on, even in error, to justify their actions. Not one of these officials, and there was a dozen of them. All with an oath of office. That's another violation. I don't know how better positioned you can be in a war when you take away their ammunition, folks. I just don't know. And I can just hear the question, well, what is that going to get you then? I mean, how do you get your money? Well, we're not about money at this point. We're about getting the law. They're supposed to be going to jail. How do we get that? Well, quit asking the question and help us. Help us make it so. We're not happening automatically for us. You notice, for them at 100%, they get a 100% release rate. If you notice this in the law, that something came up. 100% release rate for all the cops that do anything. And yet when you go in, the same DA who has the obligations to prosecute the state and for you, these officers that went bad, has a 100% loss against that. They turn around and go after you. It's a 98% conviction rate. There's got to be a problem you can identify pretty simply there, folks. When the state prosecutor who's actually elected into office under your vote is not working for you and letting off the criminal 100% of the time, I think you have a cause. Why aren't you focusing on that? And no, instead I hear a lot of people whining about it. Oh, it's so corrupt. Oh, this and that. Now, I've given quite a bit of evidence that it's possible to get the record made in your direction. Because there's not this mass of people that understand that, these guys still slip through the cracks. And I suspect your question of, well, how are you going to make the arrests will be answered when everybody steps up to start helping make the arrest. It's pretty simple. The point is for us is our record's been made. It's been made 3 years ago. I keep compounding it. Their corral is getting smaller and smaller. And now here, since the last DSL comment, there's more and more people that actually understand how small that corral is. To the point that two commissioners voted because the third one had a family tragedy happen, but a quorum of commissioners agreed they better pass their obligation on to whom it's supposed to be in law. As I've said, if that one doesn't do his oath, he gets hit too. But I'm not going to be sitting as an accessory to my own crime against me at any point. And that's all the criminal side, folks. We still got the civil side that we can go after each one of these privately. Yes, it's a lot of work, but see, we have a lot of ammunition and we just haven't been exercising it. And once I think you start exercising and we do that in numbers, they become shy of even messing with you, and you've proven yourself, at least for you, to be the porcupine they don't want to mess with. Be the porcupine. Seems simple enough. Can we do that for ourselves? Is whether or not we do. We do. See, it's always about the action. I don't know how to get around that. I've been looking. No matter how you describe this, it's what you do about it. And here I'm back up to the last. I've been trying to get to this last tab. Get on with the tabs I've got. Oh, that was the new news, and now I'm running up to the older news, and it turns on to a new subject matter, which I don't know if I want to broach at this point. It's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the lives. It's all part of someone else deciding for you what's going to happen. And they do it by policy considerations and what they tell you is law. And they try to control the mode and the things that you do with the mode and the things that you do. And you never say, wait a minute, you didn't have that ability to constrain, let's say, how I use the road. And this is what we would be getting into if I was to move on. They're going to force you by policy on what you can use because of policy that they do based on false science and all this other stuff, and you sit there and allow it. You don't integrate with these conditions. When you saw mileage tax and experiments and research coming out for pay by the mile, you didn't go out en masse and say you don't have a right to interfere with the underlying right to use the highway outside of commerce. And we need you to verify you know that that's the limit, and if you don't, we're going to put you in jail. How many people are doing that? The law is right there, folks, to do that with. And again, there's nothing I don't think I've ever said that was outside some black and white you can point to that gave you, that was your weapon and shield at the same time. That none of these people that sit in a city decision, however arrogant, can actually prevail against. And with us, they learn that really, really fast. And they've learned they better not, because with the way I look at things, any representative who tries to vilify or denigrate anybody I work with who's on the part of the law, and they try to come back with their political response, it has a ton of, dozens and dozens of eggs on their face and shoulders. They're destroyed. Why? Because they can't speak to the law. And everybody understands the principles underlying the law, and that's what you speak to. The problem is no one knows how to actually effectuate them better, and that's what we're learning, relearning. We have to relearn that because they've kind of got us beat out of us. The slaves that we is. The real revolt is inside you. Don't get revolting, though. But the real revolt is in you throwing off this ignorance and apathy in preference to having to do the job of just clearing back the battlefield America to something that's peaceful and dignified and settled and underneath a law everyone can understand without the encroachment, without the overburden, as we would say as miners, covering up the values. This is all they bring to us. And we sit as crickets against it, and somehow I don't understand. So, doesn't matter how I feel about it. That's the reality. The reality is what we do and don't do. I've been for years trying to explain to people how you do without getting yourself in trouble, because that's the way it used to happen. I mean, people, we've heard about the Montana Freeman stuff, well, they had a point. They had a real good point there, but, the execution was a little bit flawed. Something like the Harney County. They have a good point, but the execution's a little bit flawed. So I've been for years now trying to get us to not do that flawed way and try to be the example of how we do it better. Better if nothing else, just better. So thank you for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Hope something I said today will help you out. Just really, folks, just step in, find the wrong you need to make right. Thank you to Grimner again at reallibertymedia.com and the blogcaster space and ucy.tv. Jules, thank you very much for simulcasting, and anybody else that simulcast, let me know. markonthebeast@yahoo.com with any contributions, and freedomsnetwork.com, social network. You can get involved in all the terrestrial broadcasters. I do appreciate that you carry this and send it out for those that have radio still. What's that? Wow. They don't want that, do they? But anyway, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Folks, it's not going away until we help to get it to go away, and that's just a simple international law of the occupier. Take care. I'll be back next week. Tech diffs and nature willing.